Thank you all for being here today. We're going to make an effort to try to keep this conference within an hour. This is our regular Monday morning press conference in which we try to address a couple of things. First, we try to speak in general terms about what has happened during the week in terms of gun violence. Second, we focus on another topic. Sometimes that topic is the work of one of the units within the office. Sometimes it is an important investigation. Today, we are here to talk about a very important investigation that also has to do with gun violence. I am very grateful for the presence of a lot of people who contributed to this investigation, who brought it about, who made it succeed, and who have also supported it in many different ways, whether it's within the police department, within the legislature, or within the community. With us today, and I'd like to acknowledge all these folks, they will not necessarily speak, but I want to acknowledge them. With us today are William Fritzy, Assistant District Attorney and Supervisor of the DAO's Gun Violence Task Force, Assistant DA Sarah Lichter, Supervisor of the DAO's Gun Violence Task Force, ADA Jeffrey Palmer, who will speak, who is with the DAO's Gun Violence Task Force. ADA Chesley Lightsey is here. She's the Chief of the DAO's Homicide and Non-Fatal Shooting Unit. Police Commissioner Danielle Outlaw is here. We also have from the Police Department Deputy Commissioner Joel Dales, Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash. We have Chief of Detectives Frank Venor, Sergeant Grip, and we have a number of detectives who actually did the work in this case from Southwest Detective Division. The Commissioner will be identifying them herself. We have State Representative and House Leader Joanna McClinton, Chief of Staff Angelica Sanders from the Office of Representative Morgan Cephas. Our State Senator Anthony Williams from the 8th District is with us and will have some comments. Councilmember Jamie Gautier is here. Councilmember Curtis Jones. George Mosey, who is the Executive Director of Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network and a former First Assistant District Attorney in the District Attorney's Office in a prior administration. We have Andrea Custis, who is the CEO of the Urban League of Philadelphia, and Reverend Nicholas O'Rourke, Senior Pastor at the Living Water United Church of Christ. We are grateful once again for being allowed to be in this beautiful house of worship to present information today. Here is our update on gun crimes from February the 21st of 21 through February the 27th of 21. Homicides in Philadelphia year to date for this time period are at 77. This date last year they were at 60, which is a 28% increase, although it's worth noting that this period of time last year was pre-pandemic. I have a message for shooters, and I think it will be clear not only from this introduction but also from the information about the shooters who have been caught, who have been arrested, and who are going to be going to court to face consequences for a string of terrible shootings. We are here to serve notice to individuals and groups involved in gun violence in the city of Philadelphia that there will be consequences. There will be consequences from the police when you are caught. There will be consequences from the court system when you are tried. This administration, in the first quarter of last year, before the pandemic shut it down, had an 85% conviction rate on homicides and shootings. Do not think for 1 minute you're walking out the back door of that courthouse when we have our evidence together with the good work and good investigation of the PPD. We want you to understand also that if you are a shooter, put the gun down. If you are on Instagram taunting people, making fun of shootings that have occurred, inciting other people towards violence, we fully intend to hold those activities against you in a court of law. If you want to call yourself or associate with Hilltop, Northside, Southside, Pit Boys, P&B, you can expect also to be associated with SCI Greaterfoot, SCI Mahanoy, the county jails, and a whole bunch of the other SCIs, if not federal prison, for the kinds of violent activities that tear our society apart. While we remain proactive in gun violence prevention, both in the short and in the long term, we understand that there are a small number of individuals who need to be in a jail cell, and we fully intend to give them that opportunity. Message to the community is that my office remains committed to working with City Council, the Mayor, our elected officials, faith leaders, and community organizations to develop solutions to address this public health and safety crisis. This investigation itself is a clear example of how the spread of gun violence resembles the spread of a virus. That is not my notion. It's a notion that comes from criminologists. But when you listen to the details, as Mr. Palmer lays them out, when you ask your questions and you think about it, this is not the old scenario. Business people selling drugs illegally, fighting over turf. That is not what's happening here. Violence breeds violence, which is all the more reason that we need the involvement of our legislature and our community to come with public health and prevention solutions that keep the blood off the ground in the first place. I am not pleased to report to you that there were 27 non-fatal shootings last week in Philadelphia. There were, according to this data, 0 homicides. There were 111 cases opened involving guns, meaning gun possession or gun violence. The median bail set for illegal possession of guns was $100,000. Understand, for felon in possession of a weapon offenses, 6105, and for most gun possession offenses, we are seeking $1 million bail, and they're being set at 1/10. What's even worse is that the median bail being set for violent offenses involving a gun is the same. We are seeking $1 million bail for every shooting, if not more. For a few of them, we seek that people be held without bail because they are gun homicides or they have other special characteristics. Once again, we're getting 1/10 of the bail we're asking for, and we have better and better arguments for high bail because the police department is giving us the intelligence we need to make those arguments. But we do not see progress at this time. This is a condemnation of the cash bail system. We need to end the cash bail system. Truly dangerous people need to be held in jail, no matter what their money is, and people who are broke on non-serious cases need to get out. All right, with that, I want to move on to the next part of our conference, which specifically has to do with the investigation that brought us here today. It is an investigation that was done by the Gun Violence Task Force. Gun Violence Task Force, thanks to the good work of Senator Williams and many others, for many years has been a joint effort between the Attorney General's office, their agents, usually, and our attorneys, meaning the district attorneys' attorneys. The idea, and it was a good one, is that if you're going to do gun shows in Oaks and all the guns are going into Philly, then you need some agents who can be multi-jurisdictional, even if we're going to prosecute them over here. It has been a successful mission in general, and this is an example of its success. The only reason the Attorney General's office is not here on this particular presser is that they were not involved in this investigation. The detective work was done by Southwest Detective Divisions. Stay tuned. We have some other very interesting investigations that will be leading to arrests involving guns coming up, in which we are happy to be joined by the Attorney General's agents and the Attorney General's office to discuss the good work that we did together in those cases. At this time, I would like to introduce Jeffrey Palmer, an Assistant District Attorney with the Gun Violence Task Force. He is employed by the District Attorney's Office and has worked with Bill Fritzie and Sarah Lichter, who have in fact supervised much of his activity or worked together with him on the activity. He will be here to explain to us with some specifics the investigation that brings us here today. Mr. Palmer?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all today. On behalf of myself, as well as Assistant District Attorney Brian Burke, who began supervising this investigation when he was employed by our office, I want to thank our law enforcement partners, including Southwest Detectives, Detectives Brady, Ganone, and Zach Jordan, who led the investigation into these violent groups. Working with those detectives, we were able to identify 5 groups that were driving violence within the neighborhoods of Southwest and West Philadelphia. Those groups primarily associate with the areas of 60th and Lansdowne, 64th and Callow Hill, 62nd and Callow Hill, 60th and Market, 66th and Lansdowne, 61st and Jefferson, and the 56th and Market and 60th and Spruce areas. We found that those groups were engaged in violence of escalation, fueled by ongoing shootings as well as social media, and it's something as simple as schoolyard disagreements. These are not, as the DA said, these are not the conflicts that you may be used to hearing about over turf, over drugs. These are fueled by disagreements which are exacerbated by social media posts, online music video posts, and insults to the memories of homicide victims and shooting victims that were members of these groups. These group members then go out to avenge these perceived slights on social media, as well as their fallen group members, and perpetuate the same violence that they seek to avenge. There were cases identified within these feuds and the ongoing violence in Southwest Philadelphia that this partnership thought it could be solved by using investigative assets available: ballistics, cell phone evidence, social media evidence, and therefore cleared. All of these cases came out of either 2018 or 2019. Specifically identified were the few individuals who are driving crime within these neighborhoods. The individuals who may have done multiple shootings, who continue this escalation within the communities of Southwest and West Philadelphia. As a result, 7 shooting incidents were cleared, which victimized 9 citizens of Philadelphia. 4 defendants were charged for these 7 shootings, and 5 crime guns were taken off the street as a result. The evidence of these shootings were presented to the investigating grand jury, which found a prima facie case against the 4 defendants, and therefore charges were brought against 4 individuals, including charges of attempted murder, aggravated assault, violations of the Uniform Firearms Act, and other firearms and violent crime-related offenses. All 4 members were members of the aforementioned groups. Arrest warrants were issued for all 4. 2 have been taken into custody. Sabir Scott is being held on $1 million bail, and Devin Bryant was apprehended in Louisiana, extradited to Philadelphia to face trial on these charges, and is currently being held on $1 million bail. Xavier Vini and Deshaun Packer are currently in custody on unrelated offenses and will be transferred down and processed, and similarly bail will be set in those cases. What's important here is this reflects a commitment from the District Attorney's Office, the Gun Violence Task Force, and the Philadelphia Police Department to ending gun violence in our city. This should send a message to victims, not only in Southwest and West Philadelphia, that these cases, that we have not forgotten you, that we will investigate these crimes, we will solve these crimes, and we will bring to justice the people that perpetuate the violence in your communities. And this is also a message to those that perpetuate that violence, that these cases may be 2, 3 years old. You may think you're in the clear, but we haven't forgotten you either. You may be in Louisiana, but we have not forgotten you. We have not forgotten the people and the communities of Philadelphia, and we will continue to investigate these crimes and make arrests until the violence in our neighborhood stops. Thank you.
Thank you. It is now my honor to introduce Police Commissioner Outlaw and also the speakers who will follow her. Let me just say a couple of words about the Commissioner, if I may. I'm going to ask her to come forward just to share a few words for a few minutes, as long as she wants. We're very grateful to the Commissioner for the ongoing partnership and collaboration between the DAO and PPD. This is a concrete example of its success. Since the Commissioner arrived, we launched the Gun Crime Strategies and Prevention Collaborative, assigning 12 ADAs to detective divisions around the city. It was new, something that was taken from Chicago. We're grateful for the Commissioner's willingness to collaborate in that regard with us. We've developed an intelligence unit in the DAO who work with the PPD to improve the sharing of information, to strengthen cases in preparation for trial, but also to assist in bail hearings. We collaborate weekly on the GVI Custom Notification Program, and we also collaborate weekly in looking closely at that week's cases, meaning gun violence cases, to make sure that the quality, both at the PPD and at the DAO, in every aspect of the process, from investigation through prosecution, is kept as high as possible, and that we do better as much as we can. Let me also say that after the Commissioner, and without my interrupting, I'm going to ask to come forward in this order: State Representative and House Leader Joanna McClinton, State Senator Anthony Williams of the 8th District, Councilmember Curtis Jones, Councilmember Jamie Gaudier, and then George Mosey, Andrea Custis, and Reverend Nicholas O'Rourke. Commissioner.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today. As we've seen throughout the last few years, gun violence within our city has been on the rise. Unfortunately, the ease with which individuals are able to obtain illegal firearms continues to be problematic. A recent study conducted by Temple University confirmed what we've speculated for some time since lockdown restrictions were put in place almost 1 year ago, and that these restrictions have led to an exacerbation of already existing issues in disadvantaged communities. The fact that these investigations into these cases began years ago, before the pandemic was even on our radar, makes these findings even more troubling. While the COVID pandemic added considerable delays to the grand jury's ability to convene, work on these cases that we're talking about today began several years ago. Beginning in 2018, a series of shootings occurred in West and the Southwest Philadelphia areas between rival groups. We've heard that. Investigators identified some of the members of these groups and detected an ongoing pattern of back and forth violence between them. However, the process involved in doing so required some diligent PPD police work. We found that members of these groups challenge and provoke their rivals by issuing taunts and insults on the internet and mocking the deaths of rival group members who had been murdered. These insults and challenges have led, in turn, to more retaliatory violence. PPD detectives and police officers recovered cell phones, obtained social media and cell phone records, interviewed witnesses, and reviewed ballistic evidence and videos collected from crime scenes in 2018 and 2019. Information gathered from this evidence and witnesses enabled them to identify as individuals responsible for some of the shootings related to this group violence. Ballistic evidence was recovered from various crime scenes and analyzed by the Firearms Identification Unit, or our FIU. The FIU has the ability to compare fired cartridge casings, or FCCs, to each other and to firearms to determine if they were fired from the same firearm and whether an FCC was fired from a specific firearm that was later recovered by police. Additionally, the FIU submits images of FCCs to the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, or we call NIBIN, which is administered by the Bureau of ATF, or the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. NIBIN computers produce correlations, otherwise known as leads, that indicate that FCCs from different crime scenes were fired from the same gun, and or that FCCs from a crime scene were fired from a gun that was later recovered by police. Through the use of NIBIN reports and other information, it became clear that some of the same firearms were being used in multiple shootings in West Philadelphia. Videos were recovered from businesses, residences, and city cameras at or near some crime scenes. By analyzing these videos, detectives were able to determine crucial details that included the exact times, locations, and circumstances of some events and of some incidences and the vehicles used in some incidents. Social media evidence, specifically Instagram posts and conversations, was obtained and proved invaluable to this investigation. This social media evidence included posts that the authors made viewable to anyone with an Instagram account, as well as private text conversations that were obtained by executing search warrants. This evidence allowed detectives to identify group members in several ways. Some individuals would self-identify as members of a group through their Instagram handles, aka vanity names, and individuals would also post photographs of themselves with other members of the group. Detectives also analyzed the content of private conversations to identify links between members of a group. Detectives also found numerous incriminating statements in private Instagram conversations, including at times direct admissions of guilt. Detectives also viewed publicly accessible YouTube music videos depicting group members. These videos, some of which depicted group members with guns, were another way individuals would self-identify as affiliated with a group. All of this information was turned over to the district attorney's office, who subsequently convened a grand jury, the findings of which brings us here today. The members of the Philadelphia Police Department are committed to providing a safe environment for all Philadelphians. Through their intelligence gathering efforts, targeted patrolling, and thorough investigations, our police officers and detectives were able to intercept several members tied to group violence in Philadelphia's Southwest Division. And I want to take a moment to formally acknowledge the hard work of the PPD personnel and detectives involved in solving these cases, most of whom are standing behind me. Deputy Commissioner Joe Dales, Patrol, Deputy Commissioner Ben Nash of Investigations, Chief Inspector Frank Venor, Investigations, Detective James Brady, Detective David Gannon, Detective Zach Jordan, Detective Francis Mullen, Detective Thorsten Luck, and Detective Robert Daly. As you can see, a lot of work and collaboration went into these investigations, and it is because of this hard work that we are here today to announce these arrests. The work of our police officers and detectives highlights that putting up a good case takes a concerted and purposeful effort. These cases speak to the importance of constant communication across different units within our department as well as with our partner agencies. Although these arrests have made a significant impact on increasing the safety of this community, there is still much more work to be done. And again, I'm going to encourage everyone who has information, anyone who has information pertaining to this crime or any crime, please call or text our tip line at 215-686-TIPS or 215-686-8477 or contact 911. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and good afternoon. We are here today for a very important reason, and that is for almost 12 months, we've seen federal, state, and local government take extra steps to ensure that the pandemic of coronavirus came to a decline, a decrease, and hopefully soon will come to a complete end. But what we have not seen is the level of coordination. I'm proud to see our district attorney, Larry Krasner, our police commissioner, Outlaw, and all of the folks who work with their offices collectively making effort to resolve crime. We cannot talk about the 500 homicides from 2020 if we don't talk about all the outstanding cases from 2018 and 2019, 2017. Young people who really think they can do whatever they want, break any laws, and see no accountability. But today, we finally got good news. And that good news is the same type of coordination that was implemented to slow down coronavirus is happening in Southwest and West Philly to slow down the gun violence. Yes, we're working hard in Harrisburg to ensure that preventive programs are funded so that our children have activities to do besides getting into disagreements on the internet that lead to gun violence. But we also see our partners in City Hall carrying this responsibility and ensuring that in the next budget it is in fact a priority. So this is just the beginning, and we're looking forward to the continuation to bringing peace in our streets. Thank you.
I want to first thank Lonnie Herndon, who's the pastor of this church, for allowing us to be here. Certainly to our DA and our police commissioner, those members of the task force, and the detectives and police officers who spent countless hours of bringing this case to conclusion. I want you to be clear, I am proud to be the state senator. My name is Anthony Hardy Williams. I'm proud to be the state senator for the 8th Senatorial, and this is a part of it. But for those who don't know, this is where I live. This is where I grew up. And that park represents my childhood and my legacy. And I want people to understand something, that I heard the studies and I've heard all the data, but be very clear, this is very, very lived experience for me. The level of violence in black and brown communities, modest working income communities, have for almost my entire life increased and decreased, consistent with either the penetration of relationship with the police department or the resources that are part of those communities. Part of my public service came because Marcus Yates was killed, and I decided to leave my job and then serve in the General Assembly. But I will tell you that serving amongst 200 plus people and a governor sometimes does not draw the resources and direct attention to the communities like this. That's why this day is grateful and appreciative for the DA and the task force and the police commissioner. Understand something, a small idea about $500,000, which I posed to then chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Vince Fumo, the illegal gun task force, was many people greeted with some level of skepticism, quickly became a success story in this specific district within 1 year. And consequently, Senator Fumo and myself drafted a bill that created the illegal task force. It's been around for almost 20 years. And frankly, many of us have been scratching our head to find out how and when it will be applied. This is just one mechanism, certainly holding a generation to account, but understand something. They need resources from us. And so while we certainly appreciate the consequence of what the task force has done, and certainly I agree with my colleague, Representative McClinton, that those who think that they can walk these streets without consequence need to understand there is a time and a place that a reckoning will occur. But I want you also to understand we are dedicated in this budgetary cycle to those neighborhood groups that have been living on a shoestring to bring more financial resources to them so that these children, early in their life, will be greeted in the way that we would expect them to be greeted. Again, I want to thank the district attorney, the commissioner, the detectives, and all who were involved in this process.
What you see here is a partnership that represents the right hand of fellowship and often, unfortunately, the left hand of punishment. Right hand of fellowship, I know there are job programs, assistance programs that each and every one of these stakeholders have put forth to the same individuals that you see on the other side of the punishment scale. I've personally gone out with GVI to doors, knocked on doors and said and heard police, district attorneys, social workers beg people, please put the gun down, pick up the opportunity to go to work. Whatever your impediments are, we will attempt to solve them. And many people took advantage of that. But some of the people mentioned today did not, will not. And so that left hand of punishment, unfortunately, has to be as true as your right hand of fellowship. If you do not stop, we know who you are. The cameras, the Facebook posts, you're not invisible. And that the fact is that we will come for you. Why? Because you leave us no choice. That you decide to pick up the gun and you kill 7-year-old children. Samar Jones on his porch playing with his toys is not safe. We have to do what we have to do to provide that safety. I'm thankful for the partnership you see here. And I know they work very hard each and every day. I want to thank our state associates for bringing money in for that GVI program. And I want to thank my colleague at the city level for matching that money, and thank you for the operating departments here who put it to work. So this type of partnership is the kind of thing, among many things, that will help to reduce gun violence. Saturday, we took 150 guns off the street. The police department does it every day. And we have to work together to make sure that when I say I'm chair of public safety, that I feel safer today than I did yesterday. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councilmember Jamie Gaudier, and I represent the 3rd District, which includes much of West and Southwest Philadelphia. I want to thank District Attorney Krasner for bringing us all together here today and for his ongoing efforts to address the urgent crisis of gun violence here in Philadelphia. Our communities are being torn apart by this violence. Our neighbors want to know what's being done on a city level to reduce record numbers of shootings in our streets. And so I'm grateful to the district attorney's office for starting these weekly briefings to keep our residents informed and aware of new developments. I also appreciate their holistic approach to addressing these issues, balancing justice with reform and creating partnerships between law enforcement and community. But today we are here to talk about the justice piece of this work and the new developments announced by the DA and PPD. The arrests being announced here today mean that 4 people alleged to have been responsible for criminal activity and violent activity in our neighborhoods are being held accountable. As a result, police have been able to clear 7 shootings and take multiple guns off of our streets. We have known for a long time that it's a small number of people who are responsible for a large portion of the violence in our neighborhoods. It's crucial that we bring these perpetrators to justice. And this is good and commendable work. But I also want to be very clear that enforcement is just one piece of the puzzle when we talk about gun violence. This effort is also about violence prevention and violence interruption. As a city, we need to invest more resources into the street-level outreach that can intervene in these tense situations before they turn to violence. And we need to connect young people to the services and support they need to get their lives on a different and better path. And with that, I'd like to see the city be as proactive about the public health perspective that we're taking to gun violence as we have about the law enforcement perspective. When COVID-19 arrived here in Philadelphia, our city's public health operations sprang into action. We collect real-time data on infections and hospital admissions and geographic spread. We also put strong preventative and social distancing measures in place. Every city agency was put on alert. This is exactly what we need to do with gun violence, and it's a way that will actually stop all of this shooting. And I look forward to being a part of this collaborative effort to do that. So thank you so much to the DA, thank you so much to PPD, and thank you to all of our community members who participated in this effort.
I'm convinced that so much of the damage that this city is experiencing is caused and created by a very few group of people. The percentage of people who are involved in carrying guns and using guns is minuscule in comparison to the rest of us. And because of that, I believe that what we're witnessing today, the information that we've received today, is that much more significant. This investigation and the ultimate prosecution of the people who are involved in these crimes will send a message to that small percentage that can have a tremendous impact and help make the city of Philadelphia safer. My organization, the Philadelphia Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Network, isn't involved in prosecutions or investigations. We're involved in trying to make sure that those people who would use a gun, who would deliberately hurt others, have alternatives, that they would make choices that would never place them as the subject of a press conference like this. So I appreciate and congratulate the work of Southwest Detectives, the Philadelphia Police Department, and I congratulate ahead of time the work that's going to be done by the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. But the very best way to effectuate public safety is through prevention. And all of us, collectively, need to work as hard as we can to make sure that's the result. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Custis. I'm the CEO of the Urban League of Philadelphia, a 104-year-old civil rights organization. And I want to take a moment to thank District Attorney Krasner and Police Commissioner Outlaw for working together to make this happen. This absolutely shows you the result of amazing work among both organizations. We would not be here if it were not for the two of them, so Thank you for what you do every day and your force, and thank you, Larry, for all the work you do. Please know that the Urban League of Philadelphia stands strong today to stop these vicious crimes that end up in murder and injury of our babies, of our kids, and of our families. We deserve better than that. But what I also want you to know, from a very serious standpoint in looking at major cities in the United States, including Philadelphia, is that this is part of a crisis in America, in Philadelphia. It is the result of unemployment. We have unemployment rates in West Philadelphia and in North Philadelphia that are approaching 25, 26%. That's unacceptable. There is no hope when there are no jobs. When I look at the poverty level, I don't have to tell anybody in here we have the highest poverty level. You cannot continue to keep people at the level of poverty that we have. We have to uplift our communities and give them an opportunity. When you look at just the mental health area, I don't have to tell you that mental health disparities exist in the Black community. Trauma exists. You have kids that go to school every day that are traumatized by what has happened. You have our seniors who are traumatized and scared. So we have to work together and lift these other areas up in order to stop gun violence. We have to have a safe, affordable community for our residents. It is necessary. And Lamar, I want to end by saying thank you for keeping all of us here well-informed and doing great work with that. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicholas O'Rourke. I am the senior pastor of the Living Water United Church of Christ in Oxford Circle, which is the northeast section of the city. Obviously, we're standing here in a church in the southwest, Church of Christian Compassion, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how far of a distance or a gulf that is. But I'm reminded about the reality of those distances not just existing in locality, but oftentimes in differences of opinion. There are many groups, many organizations that are as committed to addressing the issue of safety in our communities as those who have spoken today. And I want to begin to make sure that those of us who are committed to safety that we can feel are generating together a co-governing model, a co-laboring process or approach to address gun violence in our city. Movement organizations, along with other groups that have been committed to this work, that we can have safety not just that we can see, but safety that we can feel in our bodies. Other pathways other than going to police in order for us to be able to create kind of communities where our loved ones can grow up. Many have already stated about the need for us to provide funding for groups that provide resources and programming for those youth growing up in the city that acts as a deterrent for them not going into lives of crime. So we want to make sure that we're doing that as well as beginning to bridge the gap about what other alternatives we can bring about to bring safety. I want to call on all government organizations, elected officials, as well as community and movement leaders and groups to work together to help address this issue. Another world is possible, another community is possible, another city is possible, a safe city is possible when we co-labor and co-govern together. And I want to shout out, obviously, the District Attorney's Office and all those who have been working with the DA's office and District Attorney Larry Krasner for struggling to figure this thing out and to help bring about the kind of city that we want. Again, thank you for your time. God bless you.
All right. That concludes our presentation. We're prepared to take questions. Obviously, your questions may be for any one of the folks who are here, especially many of these distinguished speakers. Are there any questions?
Real quick, if you don't mind saying in Spanish the message that you have for people with these arrests and trying to make progress in catching up with this crisis.
Yes, sir. El mensaje que tenemos aquí, los oficiales de la policía y también de la fiscalía, es que vamos a captar, arrestar, llevar cargos en contra de gente que están en el proceso de tiroteo, de disparos en contra de los otros filadelfianos. No aceptamos la violencia de arma aquí. Are there any other questions?
If you have one in English for you. because it's always a cat and mouse game. So you get Instagram, they move to TikTok, or they move to another. Are you talking about dedicating a department that you already have, or maybe you're talking about adding another one to stay on top of these gangs?
I don't know whether the commissioner or any one of her designees wants to comment on that or not. I'll leave that to them. I'll certainly invite it if you'd like to do that. Would you like to comment on that, Commissioner?
Sure.
Sure, okay. Let me step back once we've cleared this out. But let me also say that there certainly is a very constructive conversation that is ongoing about the use of all types of evidence gathering within the Gun Violence Task Force, and there are some very, very capable people within the PPD. Commissioner?
As with these cases, we found, again, that social media was a driving factor behind a lot of the violence that we've seen, but we also saw that in 2020, there were a lot of themes and patterns around the very thing that we're talking about today. So as such, we are internally making sure that, and Chief Honor is here as well, his detectives have been specially trained in analyzing social media, and then folks in our DIVIC, or our intelligence analysts, are also paying close attention to social media because we do know, again, it's one of the driving factors. With that said, we've also made sure that in our weekly meetings with the DA's office that we're doing what we can when we're presenting these cases for charging, that we're including all social media as well. So we've bolstered our social media efforts, and we're actually being more intentional in prioritizing. Now, I mean, the reality is we can't be the social media police, right? We can't pay attention to everything that anyone puts out there, but we do know, again, that there are small groups of individuals that's driving a large proportion of the crime here in the city. And if we have intelligence or information or data or a reason to focus on individuals on social media, we'll certainly do that.
Is there something parents can do to help you guys out, whether it's monitor social media?
Absolutely. I mean, have not only know the accounts that your children have, if we're talking about young people or anyone in your house, as for me, if you're in my house, you're under my rules. Get their passwords, know what they're, the accounts that they're on. And if you need to, if you don't have an account under your own name, find another way to find out what people in your households are posting. But I think it's absolutely important, I'll say, to make sure that folks know not only what's going on in their households as far as social media is concerned, but also as it relates to guns and any other weapons as well. And know who your friends are. Know who your kids, your nieces, your nephews, know who they associate with. So when it does come time to, answering some tough questions, it makes it that much easier for us to put our cases together.
Several of the speakers have said that there's a small number of people who are doing crime. You're referring to here in Philadelphia. I presume that that's the case in other parts of the city. Could you quantify for us, like you said, a small percentage of people? I think you have a ballpark figure, 100.
No. Yeah, no, not off the top of my head. But when I say a very small percentage, I would see, I don't want to misspeak, but it's usually under double digits, the number of people individually, citywide, or even certain districts. I mean, we happen to be talking about West Philadelphia today, but I mean, we can pick a district in any part of the city and know that a smaller portion of that, of individuals within that district are driving the number citywide because it's transient. It doesn't just stay anymore in any one part of the city.
Your question about the parents was kind of pulling at me, so I wanted to say something. I'd like to say that all our kids in our neighborhood have a mom and a dad, but unfortunately they don't. Crack has ravaged the neighborhood I grew up in, and it has done that across most of this nation. But what I am very clear about is there's a generation of young people who are scared to death every day of their friend. The significance of this day is not just that there's going to be punishment, but that somebody is listening in positions of authority and responsibility, that a DA, a police commissioner, a task force actually cares about the hood. That's what the significance of this day is. The fact that people are waiting for us to do something they will jump into the fight. I will tell you they will jump into the fight. I've walked with people who marched against drug dealers and crack houses, you know, when they didn't have a gun. But they needed backup from other people in these positions. And so I would like to say it falls to mom and dad, but frankly, it's going to fall to probably their cousin, their auntie, their friend. The person literally is like their buddy, but only goes along because they don't see any other way to maneuver in our community. And so this doesn't speak so much of punishment as it speaks to consequence and the fact that people are watching and going to provide values and structure to a life. So yes, we can do something, and yes, they are going to do something. But this will lead to more participation from a generation that, frankly, is sort of sitting on the walls wondering why the adults aren't leading in this process. Well, I'm glad you asked the question.
Commissioner, may I ask, how come transit police are not involved with none of this in our communities? When you see the under the L stops around there, there's a lot of activity, and I never see the transit cop involved in what y'all doing in our community. But where are they? What role do they play?
I'll bring Commissioner Dales up here. I will tell you that upon my arrival here, we convene once a week with our local, state, and federal partners. There's a lot of overlap, not just with SEPTA, but also with PHA, the universities, and we exchange information on a weekly basis, not just about our previous shootings, but we also meet quarterly on any issues that should be relative. So they are at the table. Commissioner Dales, if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, just to add to that, so we do work with the transit police on a daily basis, especially when it pertains to narcotics enforcement. So we do work with the transit police department. So they are out there working with us, just to let you know. Okay.
So the boundaries of university officers at 52nd and Baltimore down, more active in doing things in the community, but they also have the right to make an arrest just like a Philadelphia officer.
Yes, as long as they're within that jurisdiction.
Doing together with your unit because it's two separate ones. But as far as the patrolling and being in the neighborhood, they protect more so towards the university than the community who lives in the university.
So,
I don't understand them. I don't
so,
see
so now you're talking about a university police opposed to transit. Transit,
I want
right?
to say that on behalf of transit does the SEPTA stops, but the university
Right.
also patrols the black community.
Yes.
But I see there's a limitation on how far they go, which I do know they have the right to do the law. They don't enforce it more so in the black communities where they're responsible to patrol in their sector. But they do it more so just around the university when they come further up than the university into the black community. What do they do? Why don't we see them coming forward with stats and statistics like the police department or the detectives are doing? They have those units, if I'm not mistaken, but they're not focusing on areas where the young youth are hanging out in that area, that particular region, in their sector. They patrol.
Well, I can't speak for the other police departments or partners in law enforcement, but I will say that they do assist us within their jurisdiction and sometimes outside their jurisdiction. I will say that, but it's sad that you don't see the work that they're doing. So I do recommend that you reach out to the chief of police of those police departments and have a conversation. Maybe they can meet with you or the community, and they can share their success stories with you. They have many success stories, and they have been a very important part in reference to getting a majority of these violent offenders off the streets in Philadelphia. I will say that. Okay.
I thank you, but I think it should be on the stage as well. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if this was already addressed, forgive me if it was, but this gun violence task force here in Southwest and West Philly, is it ongoing? And also, are there similar task forces in other parts of the city doing the same thing?
Mr. Dean, the way I've been using the term task force to talk about the gun violence task force is it is a joint effort between the Attorney General's office and also the District Attorney's office. They provide agents, we provide attorneys, and in general, when those two entities work together, it covers Philadelphia and beyond, because the Attorney General's agents can go beyond Philadelphia. This particular investigation is one in which the investigative work and the policing was done and done extremely well by Southwest detectives. So we don't have a specific task force for each area. We have one task force that covers all of Philadelphia and in many instances goes beyond. For example, when we have situations where there's 120, ghost gun kits being brought into Philadelphia from the gun show in Oaks, Pennsylvania. That's kind of a classic example of how having agents who are multi-jurisdictional but also having the ability to prosecute here can be done. So our work is ongoing. I can tell you without getting more specific that we are always investigating more than one case at a time. The Gun Violence Task Force does many different tasks, including things like straw purchasing, including people who are showing up and providing false information when they purchase guns through gun stores. But this type of investigation, the investigation of a series of shootings conducted by a group of people, we have done in the past, we have done here. This is ongoing, this kind of activity, many times with PPD, many times with the agents of the Attorney General, many times with both, and we are doing that all the time. The short answer is that they were all associated. They were all conspiring one way or another, but I can certainly get you more specifics if you'd like to hear from Mr. Palmer. Would you like more? Sure. Mr. Palmer, would you come forward, please?
The 4 individuals arrested as a part of this investigation, the investigation was into 5 specific groups that were identified. The 4 individuals that were arrested as part of the arrests we're announcing here today were primarily 2 were a part of a group that's known as O to the 4, and they go from 60th and Lansdowne to the 64th and Callow Hill area. And then the other group identifies themselves as Fixers or Hilltop, and they congregate in the 61st and Jefferson area. But there are 3 other groups that were also a part of this investigation. In this specific investigation, associated with the arrests that we're announcing here today, 5 different guns.
Do you know what led up specifically to the shooting from November with the 3 victims, 8, 15, and 16? There was some kind of chase in that one?
So due to the nature of the investigation, I can't get into too many specifics. But that was an that shooting resulted from, obviously the young 8-year-old victim was not an intended target. 2 other individuals were group members and were targeted by rival group members, and then unfortunately and tragically the 8-year-old was also struck as a result of that violence between those 2 groups.
All right, we have time for one more question. Is there another question? There being no question, thank you all very much, and my gratitude to everyone who came out here for this conference.